Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ultimate Advisors Resource Podcast. I've got a very special guest from John Hancock. We've got Matt Gibson here today. He is the head of behavioral insurance activation at John Hancock. And I had to write that down or else I was going to screw that up. So I guess before I go too much further, Matt, what the heck does that even mean?
What does that mean? Yeah. So as I said earlier, we love a bag of buzzwords, but let's unpack it, right? So behavioral insurance. So fundamentally what we're doing with Vitality here in the United States with John Hancock is we are incentivizing behaviors on our insurance solutions. So you see where I'm going there? I'm connecting those two things together.
So, yeah,
Trying to
you've got
incentivize
two out of three of the
positive
words taken
behaviors
care of.
and move that forward. And fundamentally, me and my team, we're responsible for how we operate in market with our distributors, like yourself, as an intermediary, as well as Nline, producers themselves with that. So making sure they understand what we're doing, how do we bring it to life, how do we activate that message in market. So I work very closely with a lot of our distribution partners.
So you would say that you're, I guess, someone in charge of the Vitality program in the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah. So how we operate in market. So we have probably close to about 40 people that work on Vitality full time across the organization. So I act as the through line. So I report into our Lindsay Hansen, who's our CMO,
Okay.
because Vitality and fundamentally what we're doing in that space is core to our brand and identity at this point. My counterpart, Stephanie is responsible for operationally. How does Vitality operate, keeping the lights on, running the program itself? So I act as a through line from her team through marketing and to our distribution partners. So the folks that you work with, like Joey, your wholesaler, who you're familiar with.
Joey's great. Um, so for those of us, for people who haven't worked with John Hancock in the past or don't understand the Vitality program,
Mhm.
what is the Vitality program? And, like, why do you think that John Hancock decided to lean into this so heavily
Sure.
and bring it into the insurance space?
Yeah. So just being a wild pragmatist about this, it's good for our business, right? Who
Obviously,
besides, yeah, obviously, who besides your immediate friends and family would want you to live a really, really, really long time beside your life insurance company? We make no bones about it.
the
We do
company
well
that's going to pay a
financially.
couple $1 million if I die.
Exactly. Exactly. So why wouldn't we want to incentivize and motivate our insured base to, again, that behavior story, to incentivize those behaviors to live longer? Because we have a huge amount of skin in the game. If you look at actually like ACLI figures from 2023, the 2024 ones they haven't published yet, those are at some point this year, the amount of coverage in the US, including group and traditionally individually owned, is almost 24 trillion. So we have a pretty
Wow.
substantial amount of skin in the game as far as where it comes into play. So if we can, it's not about like if we can just tilt that mortality needle just the littlest bit, that's huge for us as an organization. But I don't want to be cavalier. It's also good for the end consumer when you think about it because they're not dead. Right,
Right.
just go back to traditional manufacturer. Let's pretending I'm building pens, right? As the manufacturer of this pen, I want to make it as cheap as I possibly can and charge the consumer as much as I possibly can, let the market tolerate for whatever this pen is going to cost. The consumer, on the other hand, wants the best pen possible for the least amount of money that they can spend for it. So
Yeah.
traditionally, you're kind of opposing forces. But what
Yeah.
we're doing here with Vitality is actually an aligned purpose forward and bringing it together. And that's really where the magic happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think so. There's a little bit of maybe confusion around the Vitality
Hmm.
program. And it's like a little bit when I talk to people, people are like, oh man, I don't want my insurance company watching what I'm doing. That's kind of creepy. It's kind of dystopian, let's say. But,
Sure.
after I learned more about the Vitality program personally, I found it um, maybe more like, accountability, right? Like you have some accountability, so it kind of motivates you more to do the things that, well, you should be doing anyways, and that most people wanna do. I mean, I think most people generally want to live
Absolutely.
healthy lives.
Yeah. So I think it gets down to, I think the key piece of it, right? So first and foremost, nothing in Vitality is required or compulsory, right?
Okay.
Customers have full control over what parts of the program they choose to participate in, what pieces of information they choose to share in the program and not. On that same vein, we make it very clear not only what we do with the information, but perhaps more importantly, what we don't do with the information. So first and
Okay.
foremost, we don't rent, sell, or trade that information externally. We also do not
Okay.
use that information to change the risk class of the policy itself. So if
That's,
you're
I think,
yeah,
that's some people's concern is like, "Oh, man, if I don't comply, I'm gonna get a worse deal than I already had," you know?
right. So you're issued at preferred non-smoker and you never use Vitality or you use it for a period of time and then decide you don't want to use it, you're still preferred non-smoker. We also have language, and it's part of the contract itself, that we actually don't use Vitality as a reason to deny reinstatement. So again, it is
Really?
all designed to be carrot, not stick. And I always look at it through, let's just pretend I'm every Joe consumer, right? I know probably very little about how insurance works. And this is how I would encourage actually the advisors that you work with to think about positioning it is I'll use myself as an example. I'm a preferred non-smoking 45-year-old male. I get put into a group of preferred non-smoking 45-year-old men, and we just pay the aggregate risk of that risk pool. That's the way
Right.
insurance works always. What Vitality does is allows me to say, no, John Hancock, I'm not the worst risk in that risk pool. I can prove it to you by choosing to participate in the Vitality program. And subsequently, I now want my policy to perform differently than everybody else. Now, if I decide to in policy year 2 or policy year 42 to stop using Vitality, I'm still part of that 45-year-old preferred non-smoking risk pool. I just kind of float back into that, and that's how my policy performs. It's no different than that, and I wouldn't overcomplicate it from a positioning perspective when you think about it from a producer point of view.
That is a that's a really good way to position it, I think, and you're basically being rewarded because of a 45 preferred person could pick up smoking or stop
Mhm.
exercising or, um, do whatever. I mean, they
Yeah,
could do
clean up
do
on your plate,
anything,
whatever it happens to be. Yeah,
and a certain percentage, the insurance company has to account for that. So a certain percentage of those 45-year-old preferred males are going to go this way, and some of them are going to go this way. So you're going to be charged for right down the middle. And if
100%.
you're going the better route, it seems like Vitality is going to obviously reward you for that.
Exactly. And then let's peel the onion back a little further. The audience of people that you're saying are going down the road of becoming less healthy, because we know that if I have 1,000 preferred non-smokers 5 years from now, I don't have 1,000 preferred non-smokers anymore. Some of them have gotten, sicker as time goes by.
Certainly.
But if I can now not just incentivize, but motivate and then enable through a lot of the tools in the program to maybe have fewer of those people drift off in the less ideal scenario, that's huge for us. That's really where that mortality switch starts to happen. Think of it no different than, I'll use my father as an example. My dad had a fairly substantial heart attack in his mid 60s. That was his kind of come to Jesus moment. That was his, moment where he was like, I need to start paying attention to my health and start shifting it that way. Vitality can act as that catalyst to really kind of steer the broader mortality turn into that. And that's where we brought it to life at the product level. So not only do I have the product perform differently through either premium reductions or cash value enhancements, depending, of course, on what product solution you're talking about there or how it was positioned for the client need. But I also have incentives in the program itself to drive that behavior. And I think that's really important because it's not just about the policy from a behavioral kind of science perspective. Because if it was just about the policy and I'm paying that premium annually, let's say, I only feel the benefit of what I've done in Vitality every, let's say, January.
Yeah.
What's to keep me interested in my health and longevity in August or October? Now, of course, there's value in it, at its face value about being healthy and living a long life. But that's really kind of where I think the rewards in Vitality come into play, where I think a lot of people just think of it as, oh yeah, you get gift cards and, Fitbits and little things. Those are there for very intentional reasons. They're not there to be the joke I always make. It's not meant to be the free toaster you get for opening up the savings account at the bank. They're there to be these little micro moments of celebration to reinforce the decision you're making on top of, yeah, look, I just saved, 10% of my premium on this year, or
Right.
my policy's cash value is greater because of the choices I chose to make by participating in Vitality. It's really that simple.
Yeah, so it's almost like you could say the competitiveness or the accountability
Hmm.
and then the rewards that come along with that periodically are almost more important or maybe just important to keeping the insured or the owner or whoever's participating in this on
Right.
track with regard to um their health, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what do you think would be the best way to explain this? Because again, going back to my first example,
Hmm.
I've talked about vitality to many advisors before, and they're always like,
Hmm.
"Oh yeah, that sounds like that progressive thing where they plug it in your car and ding you if you're speeding and all of this and that." And
Hmm.
it seems like a big negative, but what do you think's the best way to, if an advisor is sitting across this table from a client and saying, "Hey, you should do this policy," and it has a great feature in vitality that'll help you, improve your health and reduce
Hmm.
your premiums and all this other stuff. What do you think's the best way to explain that?
So I'm always going to give you the non-answer answer, but tell you that's what I'm giving you before I say it. But the short answer is sometimes depends on the client and really kind of the perspective in which they're coming from, right? And obviously, the folks that you work with are much better salespeople than I am, or advisors than I am. But it's always about what's important to that individual. So I'll give you kind of a couple examples. So obviously, there's the person who is coming at this from a true risk management perspective. That's where you talk about that risk pool analogy that I just kind of walked through.
Makes sense. It's
Or if
logic.
you're dealing, yeah, or if you're dealing with a customer who's really just focused in on the number, right? Like, how much do I want to spend? I want to come at it this way. You know, a great way to establish trust with that client is to reflect back what they just told you was important to them in a way that shows that you've listened. Like, listen, I understand that you want to keep the expenses down underneath $10,000, whatever the premium structure you're having the conversation with the client about. There is a way for us to not only do that, but to actually give you control. It gives you control over how the policy performs,
I like that.
allows you to kind of potentially usually bring that even lower. So again, it's shifting the control component, right? Because every other aspect of a traditional life insurance policy, the client doesn't have control over. We as the carrier tell you what the floors and caps are if it's index, what the interest rate is if it's a fixed UL. We tell you the policy charges. Heck, we even tell you what your risk class is. The only thing a client can control traditionally is what premium mode, asset allocation, depending on where it's going. But even once it's allocated, they don't have control over the outcome of that allocation
Yeah.
necessarily. Vitality is a lever that's on their side of the table that gives them control. And it's designed, again, carrot, not stick. If you choose to use it, here's the positive outcomes. If you choose not to, hey, here's your benchmark. Here's where we're at. We're never going to move away from that. So that's kind of one angle to come at it. Or if you're having a conversation with the client, let's say about health conditions, you're trying to do some form of field underwriting with that client to make sure that, okay, am I looking at preferred non-smoker? Maybe it's super preferred, or maybe it's a table rated case. You ask those health questions to try to navigate the risk class. You're doing your field underwriting. But another option is be like, listen, so I could just be like, listen, Mr. Client, you just told me you're navigating diabetes.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to your endocrinologist, you're watching what you eat, you're looking at your blood sugar. That's no longer an optional part of your life because you're actively managing it. I understand that, but I also can then give you credit beyond whatever I get from underwriting that can impact the outcome of your policy because you're choosing to do those things. I think that piece right there on those medical questions that people are thinking about, you're asking those questions already. Get another value from it. Use it to
Right.
get, you heard you just told me that you're managing this, or even in the best risk class situation. oh, I have this client, they golf 4 times a week and they never take a cart and they walk the whole thing and they're
Oh, they
amazing.
run marathons. I hear it all the time.
Right. Because that client is already viewing themselves. They're going to ask, well, what's better than super preferred?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
here's the lever that's on your side of the table. Run with it. Pun unintended, of course.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, you know what's funny is and I still have to do this, but I was telling my wife about vitality, and she likes to exercise, she likes to eat healthy, and she was like, "Wow, we need to replace my old policy from XYZ company and buy a John Hancock policy." So I'm a terrible insurance agent, so I still haven't done that yet. The hardest sale you make is to yourself, I guess. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, I think I
so it's
know a
kind of
guy that
funny.
can help you out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can probably help myself, or I can call somebody, I guess. But no, I think that's interesting, and I think seems like also people who are into fitness would be really into like almost what you just mentioned. Like I know
Mhm.
super prefers the best you can get, but what more can I do? And I think that's an interesting a point to make. So I'm sure it's popular among people who are into that type of stuff.
For sure. And it's, I want to kind of anchor that, right? It's all about, it doesn't necessarily have to be about being the marathon, being the triathlete,
Yeah,
right?
I
It's
guess that's maybe
about
a misnomer that I'm perpetuating here.
it's candidly, it is, right? No, and it is, it's about the everyday little things that you can choose to do. Something as simple as getting your annual physical or walking the dog or getting a good night's sleep. These are already things that we know we should be doing and perhaps maybe motivated to do more as a result. Vitality gives you credit for those things that you're doing. And, when we talk about the different vitality statuses and we can get into the specifics, right? Think of it no different than you would an airline's benefit program, right? The more you
Okay.
fly the airline, the higher miles you calculate into, the higher your status. The more choices you choose to make, those are into vitality points. The higher the vitality points total, the higher your status. The higher the status, the greater the impact of the policy and the other rewards. There's over 20,000 vitality points in the program at large.
Okay.
So the top status is platinum, is 10,000 vitality points. So roughly half of them. I could never do a single workout in ever. Throw all the physical activity points out the window. I still have 13,000 vitality points available to me up for grabs without
Wow.
taking a single step. So candidly, do people generally tend to do some form of physical activity, even something as simple as walking 5,000 steps? Sure. Your phone tracks that, or you don't have to wear a wearable like I am. You
Yeah.
can.
So what things do earn points? I guess it almost goes back to how does it work, but
Hmm.
so you mentioned there's 20,000 points available to get the
Hmm.
best, you got to do 10,000.
Hmm.
What things should people be prepared to do to earn enough points to get platinum or gold or silver? I guess bronze they do nothing if you get bronze.
Bronze is 0 points up to 3,500. So just put all the numbers out on the table. Bronze is 0 to 3,500. Silver is 3,500 to 7,000. 7,000 is gold, and 10,000 is platinum.
And I
So
can't get any points by spending money on my credit card.
probably not. No. Well, if you're buying, well, actually, not necessarily, because we do give points when people buy healthy food at the grocery store. So if you
Wow.
use your credit card to do
I
that,
guess
there you go.
or
But no, like joking aside. So if you get your annual physical, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a true annual physical. Maybe it's an executive physical where you're getting type of stuff done. You get credit for the biometrics that you get done at that physical. So your blood pressure, your glucose, your cholesterol, your body mass index, and if you continue not to smoke, if you don't
if
smoke.
if they're good or regardless of if you get them or not?
Both. So
Oh,
if they're
okay.
in a healthy range, so for example, if your cholesterol is under 200, for example, that would be 1,000 vitality points plus another 125 just simply for getting it done and read.
Okay. Yeah.
Similar for glucose, cholesterol, blood pressure, BMI. So even if I get all quote unquote unhealthy readings, I still get 500 points for all of those readings that I got done.
Just
And
for doing it.
just for doing it, because like, again, goes back to for something to be improvable, it has to be measurable. So if you
You
don't
gotta have
have
a
good
score.
blood pressure, you should probably know if you don't have good blood pressure. So we want to give you credit for just simply getting that done. Right. So that's one way to think about it. I will say if you have a case that has gone through medical underwriting and We'd love to have every single case go through without labs, but sometimes there are labs required, or there was labs done in the last year and that's just being pulled from their doctor's EHR. We'll give you credit for that automatically in the first year. So if you have a non-smoker client that isn't going to be like overly heavily rated, let's say, and they
Yeah.
probably have at least one or two, maybe three or all four of those biomarkers in a healthy range, they're likely going to be at least silver just from the labs that were done as part of the necessity for going through the new business process. We don't
Wow.
say, oh, you just went through those labs. You should go to your doctor, get your annual physical for vitality points. No, they just did the thing. Let's give them credit for that automatically. And we do that automatically.
So if I'm relatively healthy and my numbers are
Mhm.
decent
Yep.
and I just get a physical every year, I'm going to basically qualify for silver.
Basically qualify for silvers. All you need to get is, two of those in range and continue not to smoke and you're good.
Wow.
And I would challenge that. You got to
That's
go
not
back.
really that hard to get.
How many of your non-smoker clients are all of a sudden tomorrow going to be like, you know what? I'm going to pick up smoking, right? Probably not very many, right?
That
So
doesn't
why
happen.
wouldn't we want to give them credit for continuing not to smoke? It's similar in that piece there. And again,
Yeah,
that
I
goes
guess
back.
because again, if you go back to your example, the 45-year-old, they could
Exactly.
pick up smoking, you know,
Yeah.
if they
Like,
wanted to.
it goes back, I think, again to I'd like all of the producers to think about what we're doing with Vitality, not fundamentally as something new and different. And while yes, it is, it wasn't until what, the 1940s when they introduced gender distinct pricing and then the smoker distinct pricing in the 70s and then preferred classifications in the 80s. I'd be hard pressed to believe anyone listening to this recording who has a non-smoker client would put that client into a life insurance solution that doesn't distinguish the difference between non-smoker and smoker risks.
No.
That's all we're doing with Vitality is we're
No,
distinguishing the difference.
yeah, you really wouldn't, and I guess that's a good point. You're basically distinguishing the difference between the people that are continuing to do the healthy habits that got them a
Hmm.
whatever health rating initially, or maybe even improving from their table whatever,
Hmm.
and continuing it on. That I think makes a lot of sense. So John Hancock's been doing Vitality for at least 10 years now.
It was 10 years, April. Yep.
Okay. So do you guys have any examples or success stories where Vitality's, had a significant impact on the results?
So a couple of pieces that I'll bring to life here. So I would love to say we've seen a massive shift in mortality, but that's not how mortality studies work. To do that, I'd have to compare policies issued at John Hancock with Vitality over the last 10 years compared to policies issued without Vitality Plus over the last 10 years, comparing the death claims on both of those two populations. Now, yes, we've had death claims in policies
So,
issued in the last 10 years, but not a statistically relevant population in both of those cohorts to truly say this has been a mortality shift.
well, and you
That
could argue that a different type of person would take the Vitality program versus not taking the Vitality program.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of like positive selection that's
Yeah.
benefited from there. But I think the thing that's actually I think most telling is if we look at leading indicators to
Okay.
that. We actually look at, so as I mentioned, just those biometrics that get credit for that.
Right.
So if we look at we don't get individual customer information. We get it at a population level to validate our pricing assumptions, of course, but I don't
Sure.
know how many steps I took on the third Wednesday of March or what my blood pressure was in policy year two. But if we look at those kind of four key biomarkers, we know that, so for example, body mass index, people who had elevated body mass index, 45% of them have reduced it. People who had elevated cholesterol, about 32% of them have reduced it and brought it into a healthy range. So those, again,
That are in the Vitality
that
program?
are in the Vitality program because we have the data points to compare it at a population level. So we're seeing, so the people
Wow.
who have the room to improve, we're seeing those improve. And I don't want to get stuck in, what was it, 45 versus 32% versus 46%, whatever that has to be. The percentages aren't necessarily super important. It's just that we're actually seeing the steer start to happen. But to
It's
you, and you kind of
surprising that it's
touched on it.
that's huge because normally you think of like, in my experience, I get somebody back that's like, whatever, a table 4, and you're like, yeah, they better take the table 4 because 3 years from now is gonna be a table 7 or whatever. They're not
Right,
gonna get
right.
better, and almost always that seems to be the case, but what you're saying is almost contradictory to that, and it's like because they
Mhm.
have some program holding them accountable, they are somewhat improving for some reason. I mean, that
Absolutely.
I don't know how that compares to, like, general population, but that seems way better than what I would think.
Well, I'm all yeah, and then if you wanna compare it to quote unquote "general population," so we would compare it to our non-vitality policyholders as an example.
Right.
Obviously, we don't know what their biometrics are because 'cause they're not getting credit for those things, so why would we know that information? But if we look at it from a lapse experience perspective, right? Traditionally, anti-selection tells us that the sickest people are the ones that are gonna keep their policies, and they're not gonna be the one that lapse. What we're actually seeing is the reverse. If we
Really?
compare our Vitality Plus population to the policies that don't have Vitality, Vitality Plus policies are 15% less likely to lapse comparatively. So if we use the baseline as the normalization, it's 15% lower. But then when we look at our gold and platinum members who are most engaged, that jumps to over 55%. So you see a material switch. So the gold and platinum theoretically are the healthiest. They're far less likely to lapse. So think about that from a customer retention perspective.
Yeah, that's hard to
As an
believe.
advisor
That's
and as
hard to believe
us,
that it's that big of a difference. That's crazy.
massive. And the thing that's really interesting because Vitality is our partner in this. They operate in 41 markets across the globe with over 45 million members. So they pretty much are pretty comfortable with knowing what's going on. That experience that I just shared with you there is consistent across all the markets that they work in. Vitality engagement is driving much, much, much better persistency than non-vitality populations.
So that sort of begs another question.
Mhm.
Vitality is an entity separate from John Hancock that
Correct.
John Hancock has an exclusive with, right? I think you
Correct.
explained that a little bit before we started, but
Mhm.
maybe it'd be helpful to just touch on that
Rehash.
briefly.
Yeah. So Vitality is a subsidiary of Discovery Life and Health. They're originated out of Johannesburg, South Africa, and they've been doing this for over almost 30 years now globally. And they operate in exclusives in the markets in which they operate. So we are the exclusive partner for them on life insurance in the United States, as well as with Manulife. They have Manulife Vitality in Canada. We would love to execute Vitality in a lot of our Asia markets, but we simply can't because Vitality is already partnered with actually a competitor of ours in that market. So we were forced to do a homegrown system in our Asia market to try to do it. Candidly, the Vitality solution is much more powerful than what
Yeah.
an individual carrier. I would be a little bit bold to kind of articulate. That's part of the reason why Vitality has been so successful for us as an organization, because I'm hard pressed to believe, and I don't mean to be a little smug about this, but I will. No life insurance company is good at service. It's all this game. It's the race to the bottom, right? It's just don't be last. Just don't be last, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But Vitality only works if the service is good because if they don't, they simply won't use it, right? So that's
no,
why
it's
outsourcing to Vitality as our partner to be the one to execute engagement for us is critical.
no, I agree with that, that nobody's
I
ever
appreciate that you agree and keeping that smirk just a little small. I do appreciate that as a carrier rep for sure.
yeah, that's a challenge. I'll just say that, it's a challenge.
Fair.
So, lots have changed in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
I guess my your iPhone hasn't changed that much, but, technology is changing all the time, I mean, especially with, like, AI and all that, so
Mhm.
how, I guess, John Hancock and Vitality, how do they approach this sort of changing environment, with technology? I mean, is there gonna be big changes to the program over the next couple of years, or is it gonna remain somewhat similar? I mean, we've got wearables,
Mhm.
we've got, you got the ring nowadays, you've got all this other stuff that people have that, to monitor their health. So, what do you anticipate the future will look like?
So there's a couple of pieces here I'd love to unpack with, and you use the iPhone reference, I think, which is really good, right? Like the worst time to buy an iPhone traditionally is what? August, right before the new one comes out,
Yeah.
because you don't get whatever's new coming in. But with Vitality, and this is fundamental to what we've done, is anything we add to the Vitality program is added to both existing customers who have Vitality and new customers. So when we launched Vitality in April of 2015, the Apple Watch didn't exist.
No,
They
it
launched
didn't.
it the
Yeah, back.
following, that's the coming fall. They launched it that September. We added it to the program the next year, and both the existing customers got it and we did it. When we added the Aura Ring, as you mentioned before, existing customers have access to the Aura Ring benefit and new customers have access to the Aura Ring benefit. So we're always trying to figure out not only is what's the latest and greatest technology from a health perspective and bringing that into the program, but also what are customers asking for? What are they looking for? So one of the big things early on was customers looking for more stuff leaning into mental well-being. So we added Headspace into the program because people were looking for the credit for things being a little bit more mindful. So we added that into the program. So we have a whole team of people. I mentioned before, there's a lot of folks working at John Hancock that are focused, dedicated exclusively on this. We have a research team. They're plugged in into what's happening in the health space. We've been spending a lot of time on early detection and prevention with understanding if we find, diseases and chronic conditions and cancers early, we're much more likely to have positive health outcomes down the road versus
Like the
finding.
GRAIL program. I want to talk about that for a
Exactly.
second too when you're
Yeah.
done. But yeah.
No, but I think that's our approach is what's the latest and greatest. Now, and Brooks kind of, fairly recently said, I wish I could tell you what the next thing is that's going to be this moment, but it's going to change how health is. He's like, but I can say is that we're going to see how we can bring that to our customers through Vitality. Sometimes we'll be able to, sometimes we won't, right? Obviously, there's limitations on what we can and can't do, both regulatorily as well as cost. But GRAIL it was a great example of where that can come to life in a very, very powerful way.
Yeah, I just saw that email, but back to the Apple
Yeah.
Watch. So that's like included in the program, right? Like you can get an Apple Watch if you participate in Vitality at no cost, presumably.
So the way to get the Apple Watch works is you can get the Apple Watch for $25 plus tax. So if you're in a no tax state, like let's say New Hampshire, for example, there's no tax on it, it's $25. Then you earn the watch every month over the next 24 months based on the physical activity that you do. And you can bring it all the way down to zero just simply by using the watch and reaching your physical activity goals for that particular month. In no situation, even if I get the watch, never use it, never take a step ever, don't give it away, whatever the situation ends up being, I just pay for the watch at retail value over that 24-month period.
Oh,
So
wow.
even if I do 1 month where I get a small reduction, I still have now basically got the Apple Watch less than retail. And Apple traditionally doesn't do sales on their products traditionally. As I have Apple devices all over my house, I'm intimately familiar with the expense that Apple can be sometimes.
Yeah, that's a cool program. I think Joey actually was telling me about that, and that was surprising, just to be able to participate in this program that's going to give me discounts. You mentioned the discount on the food and a couple of other things that you can get, but
Mhm.
that's really cool, I think. So this GRAIL test, you guys just sent out an email, I think today I saw it,
Yeah.
about it. Now I didn't have time to read it, so you'll have to maybe recap it, but I saw
Absolutely.
the GRAIL
Don't
thing.
don't worry about it. You were just
Your
enthralled.
marketing team
So
was
excited.
doing such a great job. I saw the subject line. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta talk about this."
Yeah. So I think just for context, for those of you who might be unfamiliar, um, GRAIL is a company that produces the Galleri test. The Galleri test is a simple blood draw that screens an individual for over 50 different cancers from that blood draw. Traditionally, we look for 5 cancers,
So
right?
that's pretty cool. So just from a blood draw, it screens
Mhm.
for, you said 50 cancers?
Over 50 different cancers. And we only look for 5 traditionally, right? Breast
Yeah.
cancer, cervical, lung, prostate, and colorectal. So you and I, we don't get traditionally breast cancer screenings, and we certainly don't get cervical cancer screenings, right? So
Not
those two are
normally.
kind of out of the realm of screenings. Like, but the ones that are the cancers that are unfortunately the ones that are killing us. It's roughly about 70% of deaths are cancers we're not even looking for. That's when, and usually you hear, it's like, oh, so and so just got diagnosed with oh, I don't even know. Let's just pick, pancreatic cancer. And it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
stage 3, stage 4. I said, unfortunately, I had a friend with her stepmother just passed from a late diagnosis, pancreatic cancer. With the Galleri test, they're finding pancreatic cancers as early as stage 1. Right?
Wow.
You don't really hear of stage 1 pancreatic cancer, stage 2 pancreatic cancer diagnoses. Usually they happen, but it's usually, like, oh, this person got into a car accident. They're doing a scan looking for something else. Like, oh, wait, what's this over here? That's traditionally the only way they're finding it. So the way that the Galleri test works is it looks for a common signal in the blood that would say cancer signal detected, and then it predicts the origin based on a lot of science stuff that much smarter people than I could explain it to you in a much better way. It's a cancer signal detected, likely origin ovary. That would then prompt the physician to then do an abdominal or pelvic scan
Yeah.
to
Some
figure out
type of
what the next
scan.
steps would be. So the email that you just received was an individual. She came forward and shared her story because we don't get individual results. We only know how many tests we've paid for. Can't tell you which of your
So John
clients have.
Hancock's paying for these tests.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So we heard her story, and she had found an early stage um, colon cancer that she was like, outside of her window of traditionally getting that. And she caught it super, super early before it became problematic. And she shared that story. We had one of our early customers came forward and shared a story. He found a breast cancer that was in a lymph node. There
Whoa.
was, the question then is, when would he have found it? Likely
Probably when
when,
it was
and then
stage 3 or 4.
went somewhere else in his body because it was in the
Yeah.
lymph node, the bus terminal for the body. How do we do that? So that's, I think, one of the things when we're looking at Vitality, and I mean this with the utmost love for the program because I've been working on it since before we launched it. Even if you understand what we're doing with Vitality, which is about helping someone live to 92 instead of 87, that's very hard to manifest today, right? It's
Yeah.
decades down the road for a potential client that you might be sitting across the table from. Unfortunately, things like cancer can impact that family that you're having the insurance planning conversation with today, giving
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
access to tools and resources to impact that family today. We launched GRAIL and the Galleri tests in 22 for
Oh, so
us.
it's only been 3 years.
Yeah. That November, it was a Tuesday because I remember because we were in the office. I received a phone call from my mother in the morning informing me that her breast cancer had returned.
Ah,
She was a checklist of risk profiles for a lot of different reasons, one of which she had had it previously.
sure.
Fortunately, she found it super, super early, stage 1. She's doing well, and she's fine now. That same day, we received a phone call informing us that my father-in-law had been diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma.
Oh my
He
god.
had no reason to believe anything is wrong. He wasn't presenting with skin lesions, which you traditionally would think of when you think of
Yeah.
melanoma. By the time they found it, there was a 11 centimeter mass in his small intestine and another mass encapsulating his adrenal gland and kidney. I use those examples. It was unfortunate that it was the same day. We did lose Dave this past May, but it
Sorry.
begs the question that everybody asks themselves when you think about cancer. What if we caught it earlier? My
Yeah,
mother,
that's what everybody says. You're totally right about that. Yeah.
my mother caught it early. Ideal outcome. Dave, we got it much, much, much too late. Obviously, worst case scenario in that. That's why things like the Galleri test, that's why we're doing it as a carrier. We believe in it fundamentally as part of the offering we have with Vitality because it can have that meaningful component. And obviously it makes sense for us, right? Back to
Oh,
that
yeah.
pragmatism kind of approach. Like it makes a lot of sense for us. So to be clear, your clients have access to the Galleri test through their Vitality solution. If the policy is $500,000 or greater in face amount, we subsidize the test 100%. If it's under $500,000, we subsidize the test 50%. Test
Wow.
retails for $949. So again, we pay for half of it for under 500,000, 500 and greater, we pay for the whole thing. And that's available to the customer annually.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. On all policies, or does it have to be permanent?
Nope. Face amount restriction doesn't make a difference if it's term or perm.
That'd be less than term premium in some cases.
But also again, it comes down
Wow.
to the law, the whole component of numbers, right? Like it's weird. And I said this to you earlier, right? Like it's weird being like, fortunately, this person found their cancer early because it's no fortunate component of having cancer, but it's
True.
fortunate that you got it earlier. I would rather know now than 3 years from now that we didn't know. Right. And I think,
Seriously, I mean, that reason alone, if you're gonna be selling any insurance, just for death benefit purposes or whatever,
mhm,
you should probably include a part of at least a part of it. I'm not saying you have to do all of it. A part of it should be at least some type of vitality program just for this
right.
program alone. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a really huge benefit.
And we've extended that broader early detection and prevention, right? So we have another solution that we added to Vitality called Prenuvo. That is a whole body MRI option. We get that at a $500 discount, so it's retails at 2,400. Vitality customers get it at
Wow.
1999. We also have a special pricing with Function Health. Function Health, Dr. Mark Hyman is one of the founders of Function Health. They do a blood test that tests over 100 different biomarkers. So when you go for
Wow.
your annual physical, you maybe get what,
No, they
10?
don't do they do hardly anything.
They do over 100 here. And the whole intention of all this isn't we're saying at John Hancock, we're being prescriptive. You should take the Galleri test. You should do this, MRI. You should do this other blood test over here. It's we're making these available.
Yeah,
Here
you're
is
trying to
the free
open up the
cost,
access to these solutions so that people live
100%.
healthier lives. I think
Help
that's
them make better informed decisions for themselves about their health and their health outcomes. So we're really leaning hard into that early detection and prevention. And so without getting myself in trouble, there are more things in that space that we're looking at kind of bringing to life in there. One of whom we actually met with earlier this week in Boston. They came up into the office. So I do suspect we'll have more kind of in that space. But that's one of the great things about
that's
Vitality that I mentioned before.
fantastic.
We continue to add more and more to it because we know not every part of Vitality is interesting to everybody. So let's just make sure there's a breadth of options.
No, I think that's huge, and if any advisors out there are listening, if you just buy a $500,000 policy on yourself and get access to that program, that probably more than pays for just the insurance. I mean, that's you guys are gonna lose money on that deal, I guess, but, that's amazing. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So, Matt, any other final thoughts or things that advisors and agents should think about when positioning this type of product?
Yeah. I think when thinking about Vitality, don't overcomplicate it, right?
Yeah,
Like come back down to
we
kind
love
of
to do that.
those big things. We do love to do that. We love to do that. We talk past the sale. We get too into the weeds. We go into the specifics, right? I want you to think about the time and what Vitality can do for that conversation. So the time that you're sitting across the table from a husband and wife, one of them is probably showing up to that meeting because they got to show up. There's probably some paperwork they need to sign. They really don't care about death benefit IRR and caps and floors and indexing strategies. They're there because there's some piece of paper they're going to have to sign. They're going to
Yep,
feign interest. If you now can turn back to them and say, all right, we're here to talk about your insurance solution, but I also want to make sure that we're planning for your family living a longer, healthier, better life. You've now engaged that otherwise disengaged partner
it's a
and
good
brought them
point.
into the conversation. So it's shifting it from death benefit to really like about life and living. It's really just that shift in positioning. And you now pulled both of them into that conversation.
Well, and I look at my family, if I was I mean, I'm the insurance agent, but if I was talking to an insurance agent, I would be looking at, okay, well, we need to do this, this, and this. And if my wife hears about this vitality program to help keep you healthy, that would really make her way more interested in the conversation.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
really cool.
yeah,
I think
I
that's
like
great.
it.
Well,
I've been really fortunate of being able to bring this to market from when I got pulled in 2014 to when we went live in April 2015 and seeing the changes that we've done and the reception in the market that we've seen. Um, if you were to ask me 10 years ago, I'd be sitting here talking about potentially saving people's lives with what we were doing. I'd have been like, you're absolutely crazy.
yeah, no,
We're
no.
seeing it come to bear. It's really exciting in that regard.
No, it's really cool, and the fact that the advisor or agent by positioning this type of product can do that, I think is huge.
Yeah,
So, no, I think this is great. Matt, I appreciate your insight on this, and
absolutely.
thanks for joining me. Thanks for explaining the program, and yeah, thanks again.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All righty, I'm gonna stop it. Thumbnail. Smile together is what he's
Oh.
saying. It's easy for Matt with those white